Geraldine Ritter has a deeply personal and powerful story to tell. I've had the pleasure of working with Geraldine and can tell you firsthand that she brings her purpose very much to her position as head of external affairs and ESG at Organon, which many of you may know is a women's healthcare company recently spun out from Merck. She survived the May 2015 Amtrak crash outside of Philadelphia. She was in the very first car. And her story is one really of resilience and of purpose, and it's recounted in her book, Bone by Bone, a memoir of trauma and healing. I'm pleased to welcome Geraldine to the stage, and she's joined by Joanne S. Lublin, author of Power Moms, How Executive Mothers Navigate Work and Life. She is a longtime Wall Street Journal career columnist. Welcome.
Thank you very much. So today we're going to explore Geraldine's journey against this backdrop of a broader question, which is, does our own purpose align with our employers? So Geraldine, you, as we know, underwent dozens of surgeries as the most severely injured survivor of that horrible train crash. And yet somehow you're here to tell us that tale and how you emerged a stronger person. My first question has to do with how should a company's purpose incorporate some of those lessons that your own traumatic experience taught you about the importance of things like resilience, grace, and paying it forward, all of which were important issues for many of the women I interviewed for my latest book.
Thank you so much, Joanne. It's really fabulous to be here. As Trey mentioned, I was a passenger on Amtrak 188 on a completely ordinary day, a regular business trip from New Jersey down to Washington, one I had done probably 100 times. And I ended that day immobilized on a ventilator, having had a marathon surgery as an unidentified Jane Doe. And my family, once they did find me, was told that they needed to come quickly. I was unlikely to live, and my brother, a physician, packed a dark suit for the trip, for my funeral. Fast forward 2.5 years, I did recover, and I did go back to work, but only after a lot of thought about why. And my friends kept asking me, why on earth, after what you've been through, are you going back to corporate life? Don't you want to do something else? And at first I wanted to get back just because that's what normal meant, right? But then after the years went on, I thought, okay, well, why am I doing that? And I landed back on the concept of purpose. I work in healthcare. I had suffered a health crisis. I believed in what we were doing, and I believed that I could have an impact. And that seemed like a very important way to spend my time. So when companies make purpose personal, and when they invest in the health of their employees, physically, mentally, we are still in the midst of a pandemic. So, I learned in a very intense way, you don't have health, you don't have anything, and you certainly can't take it for granted. And I think that goes to organizational health as well. If our employees, if our workforce isn't healthy, they're not engaged, they're not supportive, you've got nothing.
Well, obviously, when you're working for a company whose mission is improving women's health, it makes it easy to align that with your life purpose. But I wonder how other companies can align their individual employees' life purposes with the corporate purpose.
I go back to the fact that ultimately, the purpose has to be personal. And I think the great thing about the focus that we've had over the last several years around corporate purpose is that it's, by its nature, a long-term concept, right? I mean, you can't fulfill your purpose in a day. And so I think as companies connect with their employees, as they listen to their employees, purpose is not only a unifier for your employees, but I think it, you listen and you hear back how it is resonating, and I think that can help you steer the course.
So it has to be more than the mission statement that you see on the wall when you go to the ladies' room after that coffee.
100%. If it's an arcane sentence in the proxy filing and employees don't really have any idea, yeah, you failed.
Well, in your own role now at Organon, you are overseeing ESG. And so I'm curious what the connection is between the 6 ESG goals that you have helped Organon put together and its corporate purpose.
Sure. The great thing about a spinoff, I joke that we're sort of a startup at scale because we're a big global S&P 500 company with 10,000 employees, but we're also brand new. We're not replacing one director at a time. We had to build the entire board all at once. So it truly was a very unique opportunity to build ESG into our corporate strategy from the get-go, to build the right kind of data collection into our IT systems from the get-go, to help employees understand that reducing our carbon footprint is completely connected to our mission, to our vision, to our purpose, to help women fulfill their promise. Because guess what? Who's most impacted by climate change? Disproportionately, it's women. Same thing for water scarcity. Who's most impacted by the social norms that we have around women's role in the workforce? So through our ESG strategy, we are absolutely supporting our corporate mission. And frankly, day in, day out, what we do to ensure our commercial success long term also supports those broader set of social goals. And I'll just give you one concrete example. Our biggest product is a long-acting reversible contraceptive. Well, one of the most impactful things you can do to empower women, to ensure that they finish their education and they have financial security, is to give them the ability to control when, where, and under what circumstances they decide to start a family. So for us, ESG, our commercial success, completely intertwined.
You mentioned a bunch of the goals that you established. Are there any others of the 6 that you hadn't cited that maybe you could describe?
What I'll do is actually go into a little bit more detail on my last point. We've set a public goal where in the healthcare sector, access to medicines is of overriding importance in terms of the S pillar of ESG. I think it rises very high on our priority list. And we know that 50% of pregnancies around the world are unintended. And for some folks, that's okay, right? They're happy to be surprised. But many are not in a position, very young women that are not physically able to bear a child at that time or financially secure enough to have a child at that time. Giving them access to contraception is life-changing. So we've quantified it. We said we're going to help prevent 120 million unintended pregnancies by 2030. Very well-documented methodology, because we know that when women have access to contraception, that is life-changing for them.
Well, I'm here today because when my mom got married, her sister told her she couldn't get pregnant on her honeymoon because she was having her period. So she followed her advice and did not practice birth control. And 9 months and 4 days after my parents got married, I arrived. They got married on the 4th of July, and they called me their firecracker. But link more to your corporate purpose these 3 things you talk about so much in the book: resilience, grace, and paying it forward. because it was establishing that as sort of the pillars for your own life purpose that I think inspired you to go back to work. How are you incorporating that into the corporate purpose at Organon?
You know, when you're a startup, and we just went public about 1.5 years ago, you're doing so much for the first time. And it can just feel like this series of sprints, our first this, our first that, you know, and resilience. Purpose is long-term. Building a resilient organization, a resilient workforce for the long term is what really matters. That's how we're going to achieve our goals. That's how we'll be a fulfilling place to work.
And how do you do that? How do you build a resilient workforce?
I think you do it several ways. Number one, you have a steely-eyed, realistic optimism. We have to be optimistic, right? We can drive change, but you can't do it through rose-colored glasses. You can't do it through just a communications campaign. It's got to be real, it's got to be fact-based, and it's got to be grounded in the hardcore realities. To me, that balance, we're positive, we can do it, but this is what it's going to take. And there are trade-offs. It's not always a win-win, and you're going to have to make some of those decisions. A quick personal story, when I was recovering, I thought, okay, broken bones, busted up organs, you know, I'll be back to work by the end of the summer. Right. I called my boss, said, you know, maybe I need one more surgery, maybe 6 more weeks. And I called him every other month for 2.5 years. So I never lost my optimism that I would be back, but I also just had to accept it was not going to be on my time frame, and I was not in control, and I couldn't just work harder and recover faster. And it took me quite a while to accept that.
And that's when you got grace.
And you know, yes, grace is often defined as an undeserved gift. I didn't deserve to survive any more than those other people deserved to die. But I was given a gift. And if you've been given a tremendous gift, maybe it's personal, maybe it's the gift of a fantastic job for a company that's doing great things, that gift has got to be shared. You know, you've got to repay the generosity for such a tremendous gift, and that's paying it forward.
But how, as a company, are you paying it forward?
As a company, we are keeping our patients, the women we're seeking to serve, at the forefront. We're investing in R&D projects that are going to take 5 years, 7 years to come to fruition. Why? Because there's been absolutely no innovation in so many areas of women's health for decades. And you know, I could go down the list: endometriosis, polycystic ovary syndrome, preterm labor, migraines. I mean, so many of these conditions that disproportionately affect women, we've seen no innovation. So our R&D efforts are just one way that we are quite literally paying it forward for women.
Another way that Organon helps women is by trying to advance them in the workplace. Women dominate your board. Half of the CEO's direct reports are women. And International Women's Day is a paid company holiday. What additional steps is Organon going to do to better align its purpose with yours?
So we are continuing to work to build on the culture that we've created. You know, as a spinoff, you want to establish your own separate identity. A lot of employees didn't necessarily have a choice whether they stayed with Merck or went to Organon, and we needed them to feel really good about this because there was so much to feel good about. And so we had as a very high priority from the very beginning the importance of making sure that our workforce understood our vision, understood our unique mission, understood the opportunity and the differences in the culture we wanted to create. So that kind of communication has been absolutely critical and truly prioritizing our employees and the creation of a culture, a healthy culture. One thing I'm focusing on looking forward is we've been working at breakneck speed. We joke that working at Organon is like dog years, you know? And so how do we make sure that we are also building our resilience, that we're there for the marathon, not just this sprint and the next sprint and the next sprint and the next sprint. And resilience really is a muscle. Not only is it that realistic optimism, it's also keeping your creativity. It's, you know, investing in your own health. It's staying ahead of the pain, looking at what's on the horizon and addressing it now. And if you're exhausted, you can't do that. So,
and you do that by trying to work as close as you can with the people you trust the most.
absolutely. And those are the stakeholders within the company. I've talked a lot about investing in employees and their health, but also our stakeholders outside the company, just as important.
So, Geraldine, I wonder if you could summarize one message you want to leave everyone here with about whether, in general, corporate purpose is doing what it's supposed to be doing, and if not, what should everyone take away and do differently?
I think it is doing a lot of what it is supposed to be doing. And the reason I say that is because during the pandemic, we really saw levels of trust in companies going up. One of the most trusted sources of information during the pandemic was companies. Employees were looking to companies for guidance. How do I protect myself? So the point of purpose is to keep that long-term focus. It's not just about next quarter's numbers. If you're going to meet the needs of shareholders, you've also got to meet the needs of many of your stakeholders to achieve that purpose. So I think in terms of shifting the conversation, focusing on long-term trust, purpose is fulfilling its purpose.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you.